So I'm going to start with this from Failing the Authenticity Test, which is chapter 3. And I'm reading this because this is my editor's favorite chapter. I cannot pronounce my own last name. I have known this for almost, if not quite as long, as I have known my last name. I can remember sitting with my aunt years before she would marry and discard our shared last name, and her repeatedly making the consonant sound, the, which we do not have in English. First, she would make it on its own, and then in the context of our name, and I would repeat it after her. I never got it quite right, and beyond that, I could never quite hear the difference between what she was doing and what I was doing. The Hindi alphabet, you see, has 33 consonants and between 11 and 13 vowels, depending on which reckoning you're using. Each of those letters makes its own distinct sound. According to Before Their First Words, a project about human speech development out of the University of Barcelona, an infant can hear all of the sounds that exist in human speech, which amounts to 600 consonants and 200 vowels. Between the ages of 6 to 10 months, however, babies hone in on the sounds in their native language and not only lose the ability to focus on sounds that are not part of their native language, but also the ability to hear them. This is called perceptual narrowing or perceptual reorganization. Conveniently for me, the article produced by the Barcelona project that I am reading even uses the very letter that I'm talking about. The authors write, for example, a child exposed to English loses the ability to tell the difference between different types of T sounds, e.g. a dental T and a retroflex T, whereas a child exposed to Hindi or Urdu would retain this ability as the differences in sounds are used to mark differences in meaning in those languages. Presumably a child raised in a truly bilingual home, my nephew's home for instance, where one father speaks to him in daddy's native English and the other in papa's native Italian, would end up with a full complement of those sounds. My home was not such a home. My father may have spoken to me on occasion in Hindi, Punjabi, or Urdu. Certainly, I know a collection of nouns. But at the time, theories of child development in the United States said that a child raised in 2 languages would never fully master either. And my father worked long hours and wanted to be able to speak to my mother and communicate successfully with us when he got home. And so we spoke English. Add to that an infant's innate preference for its mother's voice and inflection, and here we are. I cannot hear one of the 2 consonant sounds in my own last name. Or rather, I can almost not hear it. I can tell when somebody else is pronouncing my name correctly, but I cannot quite pin down the sound. Sometimes, with great effort and several attempts, I can passably replicate the sound. I cannot, however, rattle it off naturally as one rattles off one's own name. It is worth noting that many an Indian person, certainly my own relatives, whether or not they share the name, but also various aunties and uncles whom I'm only meeting for the first time, have felt free both in my childhood and in my adulthood to correct me on the pronunciation of my own name. My name is a shibboleth, letting any member of the Indian community, or honestly, any non-South Asian person who has put serious time and effort into learning South Asian languages, that I am in the end not authentic. All I have to do in order to fail the most basic authenticity self is introduce myself. I have failed before I have even begun. And you know, it's a really interesting thing, I say as I turn to the last section that I'm going to read. I will, in the same way that I will decide, particularly with white people, if you ask me where I'm from, I really don't mind that question. Like, I'm totally fine with the question, where are you from? But when I answer you and tell you New Haven, Connecticut, if you follow up with something that's about New Haven, Connecticut, right? A question about Yale, a question about pizza, there really isn't that much else to say about New Haven. It's really Yale or pizza. Then I like you. I know that you're a good person. You're someone I can play ball with. And if you ask where I'm really from, like, I'm taking mental notes in my head. I'll give you one more chance, I'll backtrack, and I'll tell you that I'm from Woodbridge, the suburb where I'm really from, and where incidentally the Greater New Haven JCC is. Just pitch into the crowd a little bit here, right? Then like, that's sort of your reprieve. And if you blow that and push again, then I know you're not somebody I'm ever gonna play ball with. I litmus test South Asians in the same way. If I introduce myself and you talk to me about how I should be pronouncing my last name, you don't get a second chance. Like, we're done.